So we will jump into intro because we've got some topics to chat about. So, hello, folks that have joined in so far. I'm Dr. Taylor Mizuno Moore, and I'm the founder of Mizuno Consulting. Hello, everyone. I am joined by our newest Mizuno Consulting hypnotherapist, Aidan. Hello, Aidan.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, so Aidan's going to talk with us a little bit about hypnosis, and share with us about his experiences with hypnosis. What is it? And maybe share some experiences with some clients and his own experiences with hypnosis as well. So, Aidan, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and we'll take it from there.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. My name is Aidan Beshoff. I am, as Taylor was saying, a hypnotherapist. Have been for, she's coming up on 5 years now, which is as shocking to me as it is to others. I started my journey with hypnosis back when I was going through a really tough period in my life. I was struggling with a lot of anxiety and bouts of depression, and found hypnosis not immediately, but was looking for ways to basically self-treat for these symptoms. And as someone who didn't have a lot of money or access to therapy at the time, the medium that I found that was most helpful to me was actually meditation. And meditation was the catalyst that led me to start kind of studying like what's going on during meditation. Why does it make me feel so good? And that ultimately led me down the path of understanding that it is all subconscious influence. And um, yeah, serendipitously, it was at a time when I was looking for a new path to take career-wise. And just a series of fortunate events led me to meet the right people who kind of guided me and helped me get to where I am now, which is a really good place. I can put my hand on heart and say hypnosis has literally saved my life in numerous ways. And I'm happy to share it with other people.
We love timing. We love how things we just had this conversation before we hit that record button and started letting folks in, but just how things lined up and how people show up in our lives. And I think like timing is so, I want to say kind of like underrated and underappreciated with how things happen. Um, I guess, one of the considerations for hypnosis that, I mean, I have some curiosities about as a psychotherapist are more of like the physiological understandings of hypnosis and what goes into that. Can you share a little bit more about what that means and how you consider those things?
Yeah, absolutely. So hypnosis as a term describes one person guiding another into an altered brainwave state. And you guys might be familiar with them, but we have four primary that we go in and out of all day: uh, beta, alpha, theta, and delta. And to just kind of quickly touch on each of them, beta is when you are actively engaged, attentive, focused. Alpha is when you are in a slight state of trance or hypnosis, we would call it. So, for example, if you're scrolling on your phone or if you're driving somewhere you've driven 100 times before, you're likely in a slight state of trance. Theta, which is the money zone, that is where you go to when you are dreaming. It's where your brain operates from right before you wake up, right before you fall asleep. It's when your subconscious is the most open. And then delta is when you are in deep sleep. So on a physical level, what you are aiming for with hypnosis is to get into theta. It's been found out that your cells, when you are sleeping, regenerate themselves while your brain is in theta. And of course, aside from, making a good conversation with a friend, we know that dreams can be incredibly insightful and helpful. And yeah, there's a lot of processing that goes on when you're in that state. In any case, whether it's directed or undirected, being in theta is a very healing place to be. Um, In terms of the brain itself, there is a part of the brain called the dorsal anterior cingulate, which when you are in hypnosis, well, what it does is it basically is responsible for saying, hey, pay attention to this. Hey, pay attention to this. And it's kind of like the cursor of your mind. It's constantly looking for things to focus on or pay attention to. When you're in hypnosis, this part of your brain actually reduces in activity. And this is very helpful because it allows you to give your full presence and attention to one thing at a time, whether it be your body, whether it be your emotions, whether it be past experiences. Um, so that is a key factor in what's actually happening on a physical level in hypnosis. Um, uh, Another element of it is the frontal cortex starts communicating more so with the insula, and the insula, this like allows your body deeply. It allows you to, again, focus on what's happening in your physical being. And because of the open state that you're in, it allows you to make changes more effectively, more quickly, and in a way that you would not kind of otherwise be able to. That's the kind of long and short of it.
It it does sound like there's just kind of like a general state of more open awareness overall.
Mm.
So a greater sense of consciousness in whatever that may mean for who's ever engaging with hypnosis. Um, I guess that sort of makes me think of what may be some of the misunderstandings or
Mm.
what may some folks um, I know we've had this conversation before, but there's a lot of misrepresentations
Yeah.
of hypnosis in is you kind of smirking a little bit in media.
Mm.
What are we missing? What's not accurate?
I'm glad you asked, Taylor. I could talk about this one for days, and I will keep it short as I can. But to start off with the initial question of what are the misconceptions around hypnosis, the main one, and I get asked so regularly, like, oh, do you use a stopwatch or a pendulum, you know? And the answer is yes, but only in my own time. Yeah, in hypnosis, you don't use a stopwatch or a pendulum. The other main misconception is that when a person is in hypnosis, that they don't have control over themselves. And this is kind of emphasized with how it's portrayed in media, but also with things like stage hypnosis, which is a completely different field of hypnosis. It's entertainment, you know, it's not supposed to be therapeutic. But the idea is that when you're in this state, that you don't have control over yourself, which is the opposite of the truth, in that when you are in a hypnotic state or when you're in theta, you have more control, more awareness. It is just hyper focused. So, whereas earlier we were saying that, you know, you're able to fixate on something singularly and focus on it, you might lose track of time under hypnosis. You will likely lose track of the room that you're in, but that's not to say that you aren't there. You are still there, you're always there. And if someone were to tell you to do something that would conflict your own sense of safety and well-being while under hypnosis, it would be a direct like conflict of interest for your subconscious, which is ultimately there to keep you alive, to keep you safe, and to help you grow. So that is the main one that I get asked all the time, like, are you going to make me do the funky chicken? And the simple answer is you only have to do the funky chicken if you want to. I do think that there are that the kind of mass misconception, and this is a personal opinion, so I don't expect everybody to subscribe to this, but I feel like understanding subliminal messaging and understanding the power of the subconscious is something that large corporations understand through advertising. You know, there's a reason that They speak very quickly and they repeat their own name a lot of times. It's because they're trying to make an imprint on your subconscious. So before modern times, the subconscious wasn't really, you weren't really able to study it empirically because it's very vast and um, by its very nature, it's hard to kind of create a control setting for it. But it is understood by and large that you can influence it. And it's my opinion that the lack of information and knowledge around how influential our subconscious is on our everyday life, while maybe not being intentional, is definitely the people in the world aren't benefiting from understanding and influencing it in the best way that they can. And it's as simple as that. There's just a lack of education around what your subconscious does and how you can work with it, which is very simple. And that's kind of the root of what hypnosis aims to do, is to understand and influence your own internal subconscious world.
That's helpful. And, you know, while we're while you shared, you know, how it can be harmful. I mean, if we're really going to talk about it directly, now I'm more interested in what does it look like for hypnosis to be beneficial?
So with your subconscious being, 90 plus percent of your mind, there isn't really an area of your life that it doesn't play a part in. So when people ask me, like, what do I use hypnosis or hypnotherapy to help others with? I kind of have a quick response that I roll off and where I say, help to break patterns, access a deeper part of the self, and understand and influence your inner world, which is kind of like the umbrellas that you could apply on a more specific level. People tend to use it for addictions, such as smoking. They use it to address stress and anxiety, increasing your sense of self-worth and self-esteem, and even to address physical symptoms and pain, because these exist in your brain, therefore, in part, they exist in your mind, and hypnosis can be applied to address and reduce these as well. So it really is like a process whereby if it resonates with the person, there's no limit on what it can do for them. The main discrepancy is who does it apply to, which I won't be the person to say that hypnotherapy is a one size fits all for everybody. It definitely resonates more with some people than others. There are some people who are quote unquote unhypnotizable, and that doesn't mean that they can't access and work with their subconscious. It's just that the format isn't really set up for them to really benefit from hypnosis, just because the time that it would take to get them into that state is kind of makes the juice not worth the squeeze in that way, when there are other methods that would be helpful for getting to the same place. But for the people that do resonate with it, it is a really powerful tool in that you can see instant changes after even a session.
Mhm. And you and I have talked a little bit about the demographic and population of folks that would be more susceptible to the benefits of
Mm.
hypnotherapy. And um, can you share a little bit more about maybe some of your, by also protecting confidentiality, of course, but some of the clients or some of the demographic of clients that you have seen benefit the most
Mm.
from hypnotherapy? And there was a question of intersectionality with creativity as
Mm.
well
Mm.
implied with that question.
Yeah, for sure. So if you think that we've got, two sides of the brain, left and right, left being the analytical, logical side, right being the emotional, intuitive side, when you're in hypnosis and working with your subconscious, that is the part of your mind that you're working with. Not to say that it's located there, because we're not 100% sure where exactly it is located, but to give the kind of visual idea of where you're trying to get into, that more emotional, intuitive, and creative part of your mind. So that said, examples of people that really resonate with the practice are artists, people who are highly empathetic, people who are highly emotional, the people that follow the vibe of a situation more than necessarily the specifics of it, you know? And this is a complete generalization, but that Venn diagram tends to encapsulate a lot of women, a lot of, like I said, artists, and then people, like I was saying, that are just highly emotional or intuitive. So to put an avatar to it, the mother who is, a writer is going to really resonate with the practice of hypnosis, probably more so than the male accountant, And that's not to say that one couldn't, occupy the other end of the spectrum. It's just generally speaking, that's what I've noticed in my experience. So like some examples of how I've seen it work with people. To give a clinical example, I had a client who was profusely vomiting before any time she had to get on a flight, and it was happening her entire life up until she eventually was like exhausted of all the different, avenues she had explored. I came into contact with her, and after 3 sessions, she never vomited again before getting on a flight. She said that because I checked in with her a couple of years later, and she said that there was one instance where she had started to feel a little bit ill, but she basically used the anchoring method that we basically instilled, and she said that the need and the feeling went away altogether. And that for me was like it was pretty early on and well as well in my career, and that was like a real defining moment of like, wow, this stuff works and it works in a lasting way. On the other side of it, like I'd say the area of hypnosis that I'm the most experienced in is the kind of internal exploration, in which case, it's a lot more free form and free flowing. Like the subconscious kind of leads the experience, so a client will come in with an intention for the session and they will express what they're hoping to get out of it. And then the entire time that we're speaking, the subconscious is listening and it basically formulates an experience through hypnosis that pertains to their current situation. And one that stands out in particular was a lady who came to me, and she actually came in with a completely different um, like reason for the session. She came in more so because she was looking for a new career path, and she was looking to gain some guidance and clarity on what that may be. And just through our conversations, we spoke a lot about her father, who had since passed, but who she had a really tumultuous relationship with. And I think that he had passed on before they had really resolved it. And as soon as we went into the hypnosis, she expressed herself as being in this space of wholeness, of white light, just wholeness. And um, as I like facilitated to further the experience for it, she stated that her dad was present with her in that space. And they had this entire communication and release of emotion and tension and very visceral, even for me in the room, I felt the energy of the space just like get very heavy. And then as we went through the process, it just lightened and lightened and lightened until at the end she was in this like state of ecstasy and peace and bliss. And it was another moment where I was wowed by the power of the subconscious and just people's own inner ability to process things, Like, was her dad really there? Who knows? I don't think anyone could say for sure. The experience that she had was very tactile and very healing. And um, she got what she needed out of the experience, not necessarily what she wanted, you know. She wanted to find a new career path. She ended up healing something that had been blocked up within her. And I again checked in with her a few months later, and she said that, you know, naturally she had found a new job. And it was funny to see again, like the weird kind of connections, you know. We expect something and then it kind of delivers itself in a roundabout way. Those are two examples that really stick out to me on a clinical front and on a more like internal kind of explorative front. And I'm grateful as a facilitator just to kind of witness those things, you know. An important thing to mention is that like hypnosis is always self-hypnosis. You know, I or any practitioner is there to facilitate and to guide, but they are not there to impart any of their own opinions or understandings onto anyone, you know. In theory, you could hypnotize yourself. It is a beneficial process to have another person there to keep things on track. But yeah, just as a witness to the things that people do for themselves on a regular basis in these sessions is a gift, and one that I am like super, super grateful and excited about every time I get to engage with it, you know.
Mhm. Just up until now and kind of hearing you talk about your experiences and the education of what you've learned through hypnosis and your time with these clients, what strikes me as somebody that comes from a clinical therapeutic background is that we're, for lack of a better phrase, like we're both speaking English and we're speaking the same language, but the words are different. And so I think that not every therapeutic modality works for everyone, and this just happens to be one that can be offered to a population that may not align with um I'm just kind of like thinking off the top of my head, but like the talk therapy and then all of the versions of talk therapy that can fall under that umbrella, like psychodynamic and CBT and DBT. But this one, it and the way that you're describing it, it feels, especially the way that your clients have engaged with it, it it feels very like psychologically safe forward.
Hmm.
And so there's a lot of safety with the facilitator and safety with you. And that seems to be like the primary foundation before entering the state of hypnosis. And please correct me if that's not um, the case.
No, you're spot on. To give some context, like half of if depending on the type of hypnosis that I'm doing, half of the session will be just us communicating and building up that trust, you know, because me, I know that that person's never in any sort of danger, you know, but for somebody who hasn't experienced it before, they don't have that assurance. So it's really important to instill that so that they can allow themselves to go to these deeper states and really get the most out of the experience. Um, and even to take it to a personal level, you know, it's always been my intention when I deal with anyone that like I want everyone to feel safe and comfortable. And yeah, it makes me feel at ease to know that I'm around people that feel at ease. So I often wonder how I ended up in this kind of field, which is very, you know, niche and random. But then when I really like zoom out and look at it, I'm like, yeah, it makes perfect sense. You know, this is really in alignment with who I am, you know, and yeah, getting to share that space with other people and hold it, you know, in a way that they feel that they can be safe and let go. It's it's healing for everyone involved, you know? And that's not even just to say the client and the practitioner, but like that reverberates, you know? You carry that forward with you into, you know, when you go home to your own family or your friends or your workplace. It's
Mhm.
safety is something that we are all entitled to, but unfortunately, a lot of us don't. always have access to. And finding ways to cultivate that in your life, I think, is very, very important. And whether it's through a personal practice or a therapeutic practice or sports or book club, that's something that I think everybody needs and wants.
100%. Lance threw in the chat here, are people that cannot benefit from hypnotherapy also not able to access theta?
No. So the people that are quote unquote unhypnotizable, they don't resonate with the formulation of a hypnotic experience. And there's lots of different things that can go into that, but really what it just comes down to is the person's um, personal identity or makeup. Certain people are more willing, and I'm careful about the terminology I put to it, but take somebody who is hyper trusting, and they would let a stranger bring them into an altered state of consciousness just because that's how they are. That's not to say that one is better or worse. Like would never feel safe in that environment. It's not like they don't have access to that state of mind and state of being. Essentially, if you're trying to utilize your subconscious, there's a lot of different ways that you can influence it outside of hypnosis. Hypnosis is like a fast track if you resonate with the practice. It's a fast track to make lasting changes. If your intention is to just influence your subconscious, everybody's operates in the same way that repetition and emotional charge are essentially what make the imprints on your subconscious. So if a session isn't going to do for you what you want it to, applying repetition and emotion to whatever it is you're trying to address will get you there. And to give like an example to that, let's say that you are someone who wants to increase your self-esteem, but you don't resonate with hypnosis as a practice, then the alternative would be to have some sort of basically create the space each day in your own time to affirm that to your subconscious, whether it be through breath work, whether it be through writing it, or any other number of ways. You will still have the same imprint. It might take a bit longer, but you can achieve the same results. As a way to get into theta, theta is a natural state of being for us to be in, and there's a lot of different ways you can do it. Like if it's not through hypnosis, meditation is another way, exercise, binaural beats, breath work. There's really like a lot of different avenues that you could go down, and it's just about finding the one that it resonates most with you and the one that you identify with, or the one that feels the most comfortable and welcoming, we'll say. So I actually have a little toolkit for people that are unhypnotizable. So there's a quick test you can do with someone. You basically bring them through a quick exercise, and that determines their level of suggestibility. And it's not like a yes or no thing. It's a bit of a spectrum. So the people that lean heavy into the side of the spectrum that is unhypnotizable, um, I have a little document set up for those people that if they wanted to, they could apply it to themselves. And it's a 15 to 20-minute practice every day. It involves what I just described of repetition, inner exploration on your own accord, and yeah, the application of that in your daily life. And to everybody else, having the person, the facilitator there to kind of guide and bring you through the experience, it does make for a lot quicker of a result if that's the intention.
There was one, I think there was one thing that we talked about really early on that I don't think we ever really actually addressed for those folks that aren't in the field, which is there's I guess the difference between consciousness
Mm,
and subconsciousness and unconsciousness. And
mm,
so when we're talking about um, this liminal level or subconsciousness, what does that actually mean?
mm. The way that I was taught and the view that I take of it is think of your entire consciousness as the ocean, right? And in that ocean, floating around is an iceberg. And then the tip of the iceberg that is floating above the water is the conscious mind. And the subconscious or unconscious is all that's kind of floating down below. And the wild part is that you're still the ocean. You're not just the iceberg, you're the entirety of the sea that you're floating in, you know? Another analogy that I like to use is that of the PC desktop. I refer to the conscious mind as like the monitor of the screen. You know, it's where things pop, it's where you get all the pop-up ads. You kind of have you see your cursor and like what it is that you're focusing on, and you know, it's kind of like directing the way. And then the subconscious is then the computer tower underneath, you know, or on the desk. And it's doing the processing, it's running all the programs in the background. And it's doing the kind of the heavy lifting, but it's not really seen, or you don't really always fully know what it's doing under there, you know, but you know that it's working away and that you're thankful for it because you can watch Netflix or, you know, scroll through Wikipedia. But yeah, there's a lot of different ways you could view it. That analogy is the one that I tend to gravitate towards the most because as well as that, like, you know, we all have programming just like a computer does. So the conscious mind is, we will say, to split it up, like there's a, you could look at it as like the masculine and the feminine side, right? So the masculine side is the conscious mind. It's the one that's pointing outwards. You know, your attention is penetrating the world around you and it is projecting itself outwards. Whereas the subconscious is the feminine side. It's basically taking all that data, incubating it, and then creating something around it, whether it be a belief, an emotion, or some sort of visceral, you know, bodily response. That's the way that I kind of rationalize it for myself. Now, to be completely frank, there's a lot that we don't understand about the subconscious. It is, like I was saying, an ocean, and I don't know if, you know, in my lifetime we'll get to fully map it out, but we know enough to be able to work with it. And for me, that's satisfactory. I know there are a lot of people that are like, you don't understand this. Why would you even try working with it, you know? But from the results that I've seen people have, I think it's a worthwhile endeavor, even without, you know, having a fully fledged map of the subconscious.
Mhm. From one practitioner to the next that works with the unconscious, I think we both do like very different kinds of work when we're working with the unconscious. Yours is about opening up the subconscious and unconscious mind. And my clinical work is about bringing the unconscious mind to the conscious level. So I just think it's really fascinating how so much can be applied and so much can be learned from yourself when we just kind of like move these pieces
Hmm.
around in a very like controlled environment. Just want to remind everyone that, today's Zoom is just a purely educational, and we're just chatting about hypnosis and, what Aidan has stored in his brilliant brain over the last few years. And we've got a question. What is your favorite part about being a hypnotherapist?
My favorite part about being a hypnotherapist is getting to witness people speaking from their core self. Once all those layers are removed, once all the conditioning and, you know, filters have been kind of dropped. I've done hundreds of these sessions with people, and it's always very universally like once you get to the subconscious and you're letting it kind of speak, it's all just love and expanse, and everybody at their core wants themselves and everyone around them to grow and to feel love and to be appreciated. And it doesn't matter who comes in to the therapy room, that is what it usually ends up going to, is this place of you're doing fine, you're doing better than fine, you're doing great, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. You know, all these fears and stresses that you are encountering are important and valuable to look at, but they aren't who you are. And that's what I'm grateful for, is to get to see who people really are. And it's interesting because the context is always different. Everybody's always different in their life experience and their, makeup. But at our roots, that similarity of just, wanting to grow, wanting to learn, wanting to have an experience. That's been something that, you know, I always come back to when I feel stressed, and it's like these things are important, it's like a texture that we get to play off of in our own development. The stress that we get to work with or the fear that we get to overcome. Yeah, I feel like it's a very macro approach or viewpoint that you get to look at someone's being, and it never ceases to shock and amaze me, just how much capacity people have to love and the interplay between that and then their, you know, limited human self, who's going through these trials and tribulations. And yeah, that kind of juxtaposition, it never gets old. It's like watching the best reality TV show ever.
I guess my question for you, and also I want to share with folks too that in about five or so minutes we'll open up a Q&A. But my question for you is what's what do you want people to know? Like what's your number one thing about hypnosis you want people to know? Because I do think that there are a lot of different misconceptions and misunderstandings about this modality.
Mm,
But if you could share one thing
mm,
and like really drive it home,
mhm.
what would it be? I really put you on the spot there. I
No, I love
apologize.
it. I love it. Your subconscious is there to support you. It's unfortunate that we are never really taught how to work alongside it. It is operating in the background and it is running programs that either have been given to us or we have unknowingly adopted. But it is there to serve us. It is there to help us grow, to learn. And all it wants is to see you be happy and healthy and have positive relationships and make positive movements within your life. Understanding that you can influence it and then learning how to influence it is what I would like the world to embrace. Everything that happens around us, whether you think it's happening to you or for you, it's basically your choice, and that makes the reality. Perspective is important, and if you can hold the perspective that you are an active player in your life, you will be. And if you maintain the perspective that you're a victim to this existence and that it's constantly beating you down, that will also be true. And yeah, I guess that's like the nugget of it. Whether we're aware of it or not, we are in the driver's seat, and that's what I want people to bring into their lives, is an empowerment that they can influence their life and that it's not random happenstance, that we actually are the writer, the director, and the main character in this story that we're experiencing.
I got one more question.
Mm.
which is um, one of the one of the differences from talking with you between psychotherapy and hypnosis has been psychotherapy is long-term therapy in that we start out with this initial session and the therapist plays a very significant tool in the therapy process where we hold a lot of unconscious processes and projections from the client and that's very much part of the process. And this could last for months, this could last for years. Most of my clients I've had for between 5 to 6 years. And I love all of them, and they're very, very beautiful humans. That's not necessarily the case for hypnosis. And so can you tell us a little bit about like the trajectory of what folks could expect
Mhm.
from a session or the trajectory of sessions with
Mhm.
you?
So hypnosis is a highly targeted approach to addressing some sort of, whether it be habit, pattern, symptom, whatever it is that is the focal point, through adopting a series of sessions. And everybody's different. Some people need less, some people need more, some people need one, some people need 100. It really depends on the person. And there is no one size fits all. So, but with that, there is an element of a science to formulating the process that you take someone through. So the easy one to talk about is smoking. So hypnosis is most widely applied to helping people quit smoking. And the format that it takes is usually 3 sessions or less is enough to get someone to never pick up a cigarette again, if they really want to quit. That's the kind of caveat. So if somebody is coming to me and they say, "Hey, my wife wants me to quit smoking. She told me to come check it out. Here I am." I'm going to say, "I don't know if I can work with you because I don't know if you're really ready to change at that level." Somebody says, "I have tried everything. I'm exhausted. I'm worried about my health." And you can tell it's really coming from a deep place. That person is ready to change, and hypnosis is a great catalyst for basically triggering that change because they're ready, but they're still operating from that unconscious pattern. So really it comes down to, is the person, is the desire to change greater than the desire to stay the same, which I'm sure is probably similar in a lot of cases with psychotherapy and other forms of therapy. You can only help someone as much as they want to be helped. But typically speaking, what I recommend to people is, if it were something like quit smoking, we would have 3 sessions. One would be a kind of general session, like a discovery session to kind of find out some roots. And then the following two would be like repelling cigarettes. And then the third would be, inviting in a different practice to kind of take the place. And that's like, it's pretty much that formulaic with something like that. If somebody is doing something more explorative, then uh, one session will give you a lot of content to go on, we'll say, because it's a very discursive kind of practice. So by the end of it, you will have a bullet point list of things that you can address and how you can address them. And they're all provided by you, to you, by you, through the subconscious. So that you could be working and chewing on those things for quite some time. But the nature of life is that, as we move through time, our needs change. Things that we might have tucked away might resurface, or it might be a completely different set of things. So who knows why you might return back to have a session again. Really the goal from at least where I'm sitting is to facilitate someone reaching a goal that they've set out for themselves. And whether that takes one session or a year's worth of sessions, that's the uh, that's the kind of foundation of it.
How long are sessions typically?
So if it is a clinical hypnosis session, it is 1 hour in length, and that would be something that someone would use to apply to, we'll say, smoking or fears and phobias, things like that. One of the exploratory kind of inner understanding sessions run longer, and the reason being there is a lot to kind of cover in that session. The hypnosis portion takes around 2 hours, and then, like I was saying earlier, prior to that, there's around a 2 hour discussion. And we can break those up to two separate, sit downs, we'll say, or two separate meetings. But really, we don't want to confine the process. You kind of want to give it as much space as it needs to breathe. So I've had some sessions go on that were 7 hours. I've had some that only lasted three. And again, it depends on the person. I always say to allow for a minimum of 4 hours. And really, like it's because it's an intensive session, even just like the fact that you're sitting there, I don't recommend you go straight into work after. You can, you'll be fine, you'll be well able for it. Um, but I typically recommend people to kind of take it easy, do something that, they find soothing, whether that be reading, watching TV, resting. But yeah, 1 hour for clinical hypnosis sessions and then a minimum of four for um, QHHT.
Um, Thank you, Aidan. And while you all gather your, I know what will be amazing questions, um, for Aidan, I'm actually going to turn it over to Andrew, who is our amazing marketing coordinator, who's absolutely been killing it for the last year. Um, Andrew, we've got some news to share.
Yeah, so I know Aiden mentioned a few very powerful examples there, and maybe a few of you can like truly resonate with it. So we're gonna offer a free like 15 to 30 minute consult call where you can see if hypnotherapy would be right for you. So the way we're offering this is only gonna be for people in this Zoom room right now. And I'm gonna send our Instagram and just DM us the word like hypnosis or subconscious, and then we'll coordinate from there. So only for people in this Zoom room, I'm gonna send the Instagram in the main chat right now. And so yeah, I'm sending it back to Taylor, and we'll get into the Q&A too.
Thanks, Andrew. You're amazing. Andrew's nickname at work is Super Andrew because he is super. That meant to sound a little bit more like, um, with like a little bit more emphasis. But then I realized that that was a really cheesy joke.
You nailed it,
Um,
Dale. You nailed it.
thank you so much. Yeah. The humor at Mizuno Consulting is quite dry, so we all just kind of just thank you so much. We love the cheese. Yeah.
Look, one of my favorite things to eat is nachos and cheese. So like
Oh,
people are like, yo, it's so cheesy. I'm like, perfect, good,
yeah,
excellent.
100%. Um, so yeah, folks, feel free to throw the questions in the chat. I mean, even if it's whether it's about Aidan's practice, hypnosis, about the practice in general. We also have some team members that are present in the Zoom room. Um, Thomas, we have our hospitality consultant, Lance, who is our consulting manager. Andrew, of course, is our marketing coordinator. I'm a consultant and psychotherapist. And yeah, we're all here to kind of listen to your thoughts and your questions and comments, concerns. But in the non-therapeutic, we can save that for, a consult. Um, but yeah. Are there issues that hypnotherapy isn't well equipped to address, but people commonly ask for?
I would say to that hypnotherapy could be applied to pretty much any topic of address that a person would go to therapy for. What I would say that people often assume is that it's going to be some kind of like magic pill that's going to fix all their problems for them and they don't have to exert any effort. That's absolutely not the case. And the thing with hypnosis is like it's a double-edged sword in that way because you have the power to like really influence and change your reality, which seems quite mystical, but when you really break it down, it's very pragmatic and not nearly as magical as it is made out to be. So the main kind of caveat that I say to people is like, don't assume that I have any influence over you that you don't have over yourself, because I feel like that's where it might stem from a lot of the time is people hoping that someone else can fix their problems for them. And that's never the case. We all know that. Uh, Really, what hypnosis is great for is helping you to facilitate a change in your life that you're all ready to make, as well as giving you guidance. You can do that for yourself. Um, and that would be the main thing where people apply. It's not like there's any one area of address so much as the kind of understanding that underpins it that might get in the way for people.
Really quickly, huge shout out to Brooklyn. Hello, Brooklyn. Brooklyn is another consultant on our team. Hi. Okay. Moving on to the next question. What's the longest time have you spent helping a person within one session? Did the session work for this person?
So the longest session I had was that 7 hour session, and the session was the person came in and he was an entrepreneur. He was feeling a lot of pressure and stress around. He was the main breadwinner for his family, and he needed the space to be heard and for his fears and concerns to be released. So we spent he was also a chatty person, which I think had a more to do with the length of time. Um, and it's never my job to like, cut someone off. That's why I say, the session can go on for as long as possible. But the results of the session were he had a major emotional release that he said he hadn't had in years because he had just been in such go mode the whole time. And like anything, like he went away with it with, boundaries that he was putting up or was supposed to put up for himself to ensure that he didn't get to that point again. And thankfully for him, he followed his own advice and he was able to kind of better manage his energy output. Um, on the flip side of that, I have seen people who do the session, swear by the process and how amazing it made them feel, but they don't follow their own advice. And then they come back later with the same issue. And that's what kind of takes the mysticism out of it. If your core self gives you a to-do list and you don't do the things on it, how do you expect the change to occur? Um, so it does go both ways. That session was particularly long because he had a lot to say, and I feel like in his normal everyday life, he was never in a position where he could just release. Everything was so hyper regimented and focused around obtaining these goals that he was really putting his own mental and emotional well-being on the long finger, and he needed that 7 hours to vent and to release and to allow himself to be held. That's essentially what I took from it was because as he was speaking and as he was like crying and letting out how he was feeling, it was very boyish, and this man is like middle-aged, very well established, but his inner child needed to be heard, and that was what the session did for him. It gave him a space and a spotlight for um, a younger, more innocent part of himself to kind of take the microphone for a minute.
We see that in therapy sessions all the time too, is just giving clients a lot of space to let them express themselves, what they've been holding back for so long. And it seems very similarly that that's what you were able to provide for this person as well. Yeah. Julie, in the situation when someone is very willing to try it, but it's just not working for them, how many times would you keep trying until deeming this person unhypnotizable?
So prior to doing a session with someone, it would be pertinent to have the person go through this exercise. And it's basically a suggestibility exercise. And it's very simple. It involves the person sitting there in a relaxed position and the facilitator guiding them to basically feel differences in the weight of their arms. And that's usually a good gauge. So if you say to someone if their arms are out and you suggest that it starts to feel lighter and their hand shoots up, that's obviously someone who is going to have a higher level of suggestibility versus somebody who might slowly, and that's where the spectrum comes into it, because some people will respond to it in some way, but not to a point it's where it's like potent enough to the point where you wouldn't suggest it furthering. In terms of sessions that I've had with people that were unhypnotizable, there's only been two instances that I've had in my career where the person didn't go into a state of hypnosis, and those two people were my mother and father. So I found out after that through my mentor that the parents and family members in general are always the hardest ones to work with because of the conditioning that they have as parent. They are the protector. They're not supposed to let their guard down around their kids like that, etc., etc. So those are the only two instances where the person at no point went under hypnosis. And after attempting it for maybe 30 minutes to 40 minutes, we both agreed that it was best to just kind of bring it back, not try and pursue it any further. And then there were other instances in between where people would have been resistant to the process and eventually do get there. Um, but again, is the juice worth the squeeze kind of a situation. If somebody's going to spend an hour to even get into the mindset to do hypnosis, they're probably better off exploring another option. I'm a big advocate of, no one size fits all.
And we'll do one last question from Lance, and then we'll close it out. Um, do people use hypnotherapy as an alternative to clinical therapy like Taylor does, or would you recommend to do both?
I would say try both and find which one feels the best to you. Um, yeah, everyone is so unique in their, in their being, the fingerprint that you have on the world. It's only natural that there are going to be avenues that you feel really help you and others that might help a little bit, but not as much as others. So my advice is always to explore as many as possible. And through that, act, you will end up at the one that is most aligned with who you are. And for me, it comes down to like an input output kind of structure. If I say that I want to, you know, climb Mount Everest, but I never train, I never climb other mountains, I look at people climbing mountains on YouTube. That's all I do. I'm not putting in very much, therefore, it's not very much that I'm getting out of it. Whereas if I am constantly training and hiking and visiting other peaks, it's fair to assume that the input of energy that I am exerting will be reflected in the output. And one day, I might be invited to go and climb on Mount Everest. Or same thing if you're looking for a job, if you're saying you need a new job and you send out one application, odds are it's not as likely you'll get a job as if you send out 1,000. So that's the kind of approach that I recommend to people is try everything and anything as long as it's credible and as long as it's safe and you feel like it could be of help to you.
Well, thanks, Aidan, and thanks
Thank you.
everybody for joining. Appreciate your time, and I also want to respect your time as well because we are a little past 7. So this recording will be up on our website, www. I can't believe I said www. MizunoConsulting.com under events within 24 hours. So if you want to contact Aidan, Aidan is up on the website, and yeah, we can go ahead and hit that contact button on our website. And yeah, he's available to take clients if you're interested.
Thank you,
Yeah.
everybody, for the time. Thank you, Taylor. Thank you,
Thank
Andrew.
you,
Thank you,
Aidan.
Lance. Thank you, Thomas.